Professor Cox, thank you for joining me today.
Jeffrey, I appreciate getting to talk with you.
Hey, listen, I really enjoyed reading through this concise guide again. It's just outstanding.
Well, I'm always happy to hear comments like that, as you can well imagine.
Well, it serves such an important function because, like, even if you've read, I was thinking about this, right? So, like, let's say you've read an 800 page treatise on economics, human action, whatever it's going to be. You still need a small thing to carry around, to remind you of the essential points. You've done such a good job of boiling down all the essential points.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Of course, that was the purpose when I wrote it. Gosh, what was it, 15 or 20 years ago? So,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now, tell me, why did you choose? Because we cover a lot of policy issues, in the opening section, but then as we get towards the end, you've got more of the theoretical stuff.
Okay. Well, I've been teaching the principles of economics since 1979, and it basically occurred to me that, when you get in conversations with people about the minimum wage or the more technical stuff, it typically is just a few sentences back and forth. And so I wanted a way to encapsulate what I thought was wrong with some of these technical issues that students will encounter in economics class. Perfect
Yeah.
competition.
And it serves an important function because I was thinking about this. This is the way a lot of economics debates take place. You say, well, look, you can't print your way to prosperity, and then somebody responds, no, but you got to consider the multiplier effect.
Hmm.
And if you don't know what that is or don't understand it, then you're kind of blinded by science.
You are, and hopefully I covered that well enough that somebody would be able to digest the essential there. But and by the way, I wanted to thank you for the preface you wrote. You just remind me of that, obviously. Very flattering and very kind, and I couldn't ask for anything better. So thank you.
How many students do you suppose you've taught over the years?
Boy, ah, several thousand. That's the safe answer.
Yeah.
Easily several thousand.
And did you ever get tired of teaching economics?
No, right now I'm online. I only teach online for the last 3 years, and I actually realize on occasion that I miss the actual getting to stand there and explain to 30 people about supply and demand. And one of my pleasures as being an instructor for so long is I realized after, let's say, 20 years or so, I still enjoyed going over supply and demand with my classes just as much as I did the first year or so. So it's been, a very pleasant experience for me.
Why is it that people don't seem to have an intuition about economics? I mean, why is it that people's first thoughts about economics are so often incorrect? I'm thinking about, for example, the price gouging case.
Well, my answer to that is because it takes thinking beyond the first step to arrive at what ultimately is the right viewpoint. And that's what I liked about economics when I took it as a freshman or sophomore in college, is that it leads you to conclusions you wouldn't expect initially. But when you put a little sustained thought into it, it turns out that the conclusions are kind of surprising at times. So, everybody's first thought is, of course, if you put in price gouging laws, then you're stopping the prices from going up and you're benefiting the consumer. And they don't think about, well, wait a minute, what effect does this have on supply not being there, basically? And what effect does this have on other people unnecessarily buying the product when they don't really need it and would put off buying until the price came down if there was no price gouging laws? So I think it's the multi-step thinking that is the problem.
Yeah, so I suppose that's true that anything that requires several steps of logic is kind of doomed in our society
I'm
today.
afraid. I was at a talk one time, and I can't remember who it was. He said a moment's thought, and somebody would realize the error of their perspective. And then he said, but, a moment's thought is a long time for a lot of people. And so, I mean, I was the same way, let me admit to it, and I assume you were. We all came thinking that price controls were a good idea and minimum wage laws were a good idea when we first paid any attention to them.
Well, and you raise a good point about that moment's thought thing, and this is really what drove you to write this book, was that you figured that in most discussions with people, you only have a minute or two to make your points,
Right.
and that's why you wrote just one or two pages about each topic.
Right, and I think the other part of that is a lot of this is what I covered in class. I mean, I basically took portions of my lectures and put them into chapters here. And let me admit, I'm not going to write the magnum opus of a Rothbard or a Mises, and I'm happy with that. This is what I can do, and I hope it's useful.
Well, the other thing, Professor Cox, is this is what I remind people of all the time. Those books have already been written.
Hmm. Right.
So it's not necessary that we just keep rewriting them. We can think of them as capital goods and think of the rest of what we do as creating consumer goods.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, more people would be inclined to read the Concise Guide to Economics than Human Action. It's just easier on them.
Now, there was this moment, I think I talked about it in my introduction to this book, when Mayor Bloomberg briefly, ever so briefly, considered maybe letting the free market determine prices, and then quickly ruled it out. Why do you suppose that? Why is it that politicians are so quick to reject liberty, even though it would be so much more effective, even for achieving their own stated aims?
Well, I'm not sure that last statement necessarily true. You know what Milton Friedman said, if I can quote Friedman: "Good politics is not good economics. Good economics is not good politics."
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the way I see it, Mayor Bloomberg's self-interest is to look like he's out there protecting the little guy. And so what if they get squashed in the process? The impression or the understanding of what he's done is positive from the average consumer's perspective.
So it's that impulse to control. They see themselves benefiting from that, gaining more political points by controlling things rather than just telling people what's true.
I think so. It takes a bit of explanation more than a moment's thought to understand why price gouging laws are actually harmful to the consumers. So.
These anti-gouging laws, they haven't been around, too long. They seem like they're the product of the last, what, 10, 15 years, something like that, right?
Well, I mean, you could at least go back to the 1973 oil crisis. That, in effect, was an anti-price
Yeah,
gouging by and then you go back to World War II when there was price controls across the entire
sure,
economy,
sure.
or go back to Diocletian when was he around?
Yeah, yeah. But this term gouging and
True.
this idea that we've got to have controls, especially during emergency
Hmm.
situations. Like the gouging laws don't pertain really in normal times, do they? I mean, I think most people in New Jersey and New York are free to raise their gas prices any other time, right? But it's just during the emergency suddenly the anti-gouging laws become operative, and yet that's when you need prices to adjust more than any other time.
That's true. All we can do is explain it and hope some people will come around to our viewpoint. But I mean, we get good evidence on our side, obviously.
What do you think? What other points do you think in your book are the least understood aspects of economics today?
Okay, well, the whole corporate competition model and that whole market models approach, of course, the Austrian perspective is firms are engaged in rivalrous competition trying to win the consumer's favor instead of the mainstream economic theory that you can show it all on a graph with tangents and so forth. So
Yeah.
that one's one. Certainly the multiplier, I mean, that's completely remote to the average person, and they kind of overwhelmed if somebody throws it at them.
Right.
Um, what else? Let's see. Throw me off here, Jeffrey. I'll be more familiar with my own book, you think,
And
right?
antitrust, maybe another. I suppose in everything you address, in a way, is represents a kind of popular fallacy.
Well, how about licensing?
Oh yeah,
The profit and loss system. I
yeah.
mean, unfortunately, the average consumer, average person in the street thinks a profit is where a firm's being mean enough to charge them too much money instead of a reward for doing the right thing that consumers want.
You remember that famous? I don't know if you saw that famous video where Peter Schiff went to the Democratic National Convention and walked around trying to get people to sign up for his plan to abolish corporate profits.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, and he got a lot of people on going for that one.
Yeah, well, I missed that. But, speculators, there's another good example. Of course, that fits right in with the price gouging routine.
Right.
Protectionism or free trade, I think, is
Uh,
pretty clearly not understood very well. So,
yeah. Well, let's hope that this re-release and a really very large distribution of the book has an effect then.
Well, certainly hope so, and I wish Laissez Faire Books the best, and I hope that this helps generate some revenue for you guys.
Thank you so much. And hey, listen, it's really great to be back in touch with you, and let's stay in touch, all right, Jim?
Will do. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, sir. See ya.